All right, peace and blessings, peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are the Doc and the Radical, and we are normally on Fridays, but since I have we have our daughter's graduation coming up, we are not going to be on Friday, so we're going to do today and tomorrow to make up for losing out on Friday. And we got Mac 285. First and foremost in the house, peace and blessings. We're glad you're here. All right, all right. Our topic today is why Booker T. Washington is still relevant in 2024. All right, peace and blessings, Doc.
Peace, my brother. Peace, peace, peace. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. So, looking at it, Booker T. Washington, he was the brother who talked about drop your buckets where they are. Don't complain about it. Let's get to work and we'll meet equality eventually down the line. He had a big, well, I don't know, I don't say big, but he had a disagreement with W.E.B. Du Bois. They didn't see things the same way, or they didn't see getting to the same result the same way. We'll get into that and see what's relevant. We know Booker T. Washington was I guess you can say a consult to President Roosevelt. So some things I'm quite sure we're going to learn a lot about what was his things that he got done, what was his accomplishments, and how we are either living it or betraying it. I want to go ahead and welcome in Twin Pyramid. Peace and blessings, Twin. We're glad you're here. Brother Willie Rivers, peace and blessings, Brother Willie. We're glad you're here. And Brother Mac 285, we are glad you are here. All right, Doc. W.E.B. Du Bois. Is he still, Booker T. Washington, I'm sorry. Is he still relevant?
Most certainly. His plan is actually still active. We just don't recognize it now. It's, it was the best plan that we had. And it's the plan that has really been, if we're being honest about it, and we're talking about building a Black nation, it is really the only reasonable plan that we had. And I would argue that we've ever had, but it's a plan that we don't recognize anymore. I'll say that again, because I really understand that. But at the exact same time, the Washingtonian legacy is still front and center. We just, once again, we don't recognize it. And Washington has been maligned. Out of all the Black men in history that actually lived, we could throw Uncle Tom in there from Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, but he was a fictional character somewhat. But Washington is the most maligned, most misunderstood, and people will never understand him unless they take him out of that. If they take him out of that historical moment, that historical context of where he's at, they'll never get what Washington was doing and the greatness that he actually achieved.
So what exactly was his plan? What is this Washington's plan?
How do you not recognize Booker T. Washington's plan? Okay, it's the same plan that Marcus Mosiah Garvey had. It's the same plan that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad put into play. Okay, the plan is quite simply that let's face facts. For those of us, and keep in mind, Washington was born into slavery, hence the title of his book, Up from Slavery. Washington comes out understanding how poor it is. Du Bois said this. He said, it's hard to be poor in a rich land. And Booker T. Washington understands that 100% because he was born into slavery. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he's speaking to a people who have been enslaved, and he understands how poor we actually are. So to have a situation where you have a man who has got a, as our people often say, it's one of the Negro colloquialisms, um, that we had to make a way out of no way. And until you situate Booker T. Washington within that inside that historical context, you're not going to understand it in his contributions, his achievements, and things like that. So this is a man who was born into slavery. His father was his owner. Okay. And by the time he died, this man had supped with presidents. Booker T. Washington is the most significant Negro in America post Frederick Douglass, all the way to his death. If you wanted something done, you had to go through Booker T. Washington. I was on, for some reason, I was on my way to Atlanta. I think I just chose to drive a different way home from Houston to Ohio. And I'm driving and I look and I see the exit for Tuskegee University.
Mm-hmm.
Only time I've ever been there. Okay. So I said, I'll probably never be in Alabama ever again. I pulled off and I went and stayed in what I would later learn was the original building for Tuskegee. The next morning, I got up and, well, that night, I'll say, that night I was so enthused with being there. And I wanted to see, because I'm a Washingtonian, I wanted to see everything I could see about Booker T. Washington. And they were closed by that time. It's 6, 7 o'clock p.m. I went to Booker T. Washington's house. His house sat on the corner of Tuskegee University.
Mm-hmm.
I did a B&E on Booker T. Washington's house. I literally shoved the door until it opened, and I went in there, to see what was inside of there. Used my little light from my cell phone. The next morning when I got up, I went and walked the campus. I walked their yard. And as a historian, I'm going to tell you, to look to my right and see a building where the funds came from Andrew Carnegie. Look to your left, John D. Rockefeller. Okay. Henry Ford. His accomplishments were incredible. And what he was trying to do for a poor people should never be discounted. If you look at the speech that he gave at the Atlanta Cotton States Exposition, he lays out the plan right there as to what it is we should be doing and how we can get it done.
So, but like exactly what is the plan though? Was it just to?
The plan is for, and of course he gets this from his form who he calls his foremost educational mentor, General
Mm-hmm.
Samuel Chapman Armstrong, who is the president of Hampton. What will become is Hampton Normal Institute when Washington attends there. And what General Samuel Chapman Armstrong infuses in Booker T. Washington is quite simply whatever you were doing in slavery, and he's talking about black folk, you should continue in freedom. Now that would rub people the wrong way.
Right.
That whatever you were doing in slavery, you should continue in freedom. Okay? Now, saying that, what is Washington saying? Probably the best way to talk about this moment of Booker T. Washington, and what his plan is to look at, and Washington often talked in parables, almost as if he was messianic. And Washington tells the story of it's the opening of a semester at Tuskegee.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a young black girl who comes to Tuskegee. She goes to school there. She's enrolled there. And she has a note. And she asks if she can hand this to Mr. Washington. And the note basically is from her mother. And it says, "Dear Mr. Washington, I'm entrusting in you my most prized possession, my daughter. I expect that when she finishes her studies at Tuskegee, that she will be an educated, refined, intelligent young lady. I have but one request, and that request is that she not be forced to learn anything dealing with laundry because I'm a laundress myself. Okay. And I want something better for my child. I don't want her to have to do what I've had to do to eke out a living. Booker T. Washington takes the letter, folds it back up, and hands it to the young lady and says, "Give me a week to think if I'll even allow you to remain here." Now, what do you think upset him?
Because she didn't want her daughter to, wash clothes like she was doing. She didn't. He didn't. She didn't find no honor in washing clothes.
And what does Booker T. Washington, what do you think Washington sees?
He sees that there is honor in washing clothes.
If you're, I don't care how black you are, I don't care how illiterate you are, I don't care about any of those things. But if you're taking in clothes and you're handling these clothes, let's call that what it is. It's a business. You're an entrepreneur. And apparently you're successful enough to save up the money because there is no FAFSA. You saved up enough money doing clothes to send your child off to school, which is a Herculean task when you imagine what a pittance that they actually received. Washington's thinking is, and once again, it's coming from General Samuel Chapman Armstrong. Um, you need to continue doing that. Okay? Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Okay? Maybe your daughter, this girl, because she's more than likely helped her mother do clothes and handle clothes, could she not be the one that comes up with the washing machine, the dryer, fabric softener, how to make fabrics last longer? Washington's point is build upon what those before you did. You don't see other people. How many businesses? I remember in my hometown we had a garage. I want to say his last name was Rob Gander. His dad ran a garage business as far as installing garages that would go up and down. Well, when Rob Gander graduated, what do you think he went and did? Worked for his daddy and took over that business. So in many ways, what Washington is going to say, especially if you look at that speech that I sent you earlier, he says, we must not forget in the great leap from slavery to freedom that the masses of us are to live by our hands. So what Washington is advocating for, and he says, listen, this generation that has just come out of chattel slavery, this generation right here, we're going to be the foundation. We're going to be the building blocks for those who are going to come after us. If you look at Booker T. Washington's own story, his own legacy, Washington, his daughter becomes a nurse. She was able to stand upon his shoulders and achieve more than what he achieved as far as education goes. But the danger is you not recognizing what's right there in front of
you. Interesting. Now, his because I was listening to a few things about him while I was at work today. I
I
think
know they hated him, didn't they?
Yeah, he walked like 200 miles to school or something like that, or moving. The family moved or something, and they wound up walking the whole way.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember that Washington is born into slavery, but there's a black man who raises him, not that sperm donor white slave master. Washington is going to be raised in a city called Malden, West Virginia, coal mining town, and these people are poor. Washington has to work as a child, and when that shift conflicted with the new school that had been created in Malden, Washington wasn't allowed to leave early, work early. He wasn't allowed to quit that job. Okay. He's in a very tight situation. And it really displays his ingenuity when you're looking at this story. because Booker T. Washington does, and I'll present it to you like I present it to my students. If the teacher won't allow you to arrive late, school starts at 8 o'clock, and you don't get off work until 8 o'clock. Okay, how could you make it there?
You have to leave work early.
You can't. You gonna get fired?
Mm-hmm.
They need that job. These are they're uneducated, poor, common laborers. Booker T. Washington slips his little black fingers up to the clock and moves it forward about 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So what they think is 8 o'clock is really 7:45, and it allows him to make it to school.
Wow.
And that's kind of Booker T. Washington, in a nutshell, the ability to go ahead and make a way out of nowhere.
Mm. Now, in his plan of getting us to be educated in the arts of just doing
Well,
whatever it is that you were doing. Um,
well, I mean, he's talking about vocational education. He's
mhm,
not talking about this classic learning. I mean, think about it. It's 1890. What if you became a the greatest orator ever? Okay, friends, countrymen, Romans, you can do all of that.
mhm,
You need to eat today.
mhm,
Who's going to pay a Negro in 1890 to get up and recite poetry or poems or maybe Phyllis Wheatley, but beyond that, no.
mhm,
Once again, another Washington parable. When Washington is saying, he talks about when he was searching for the perfect place to start his school. And this is a moment, as we well know, historically, Black folk could not stay in hotels. We had to stay with other Black folk. And Washington writes about being hosted by a Black family. And he
mhm,
says they were poor. There was a mother, a father, and a son, a child, who was about 12, 13 years old. And Washington says that when he woke up in the morning, the mother had already cooked breakfast and was actually sweeping the dirt floor that their little shanty rested upon, trying to make it as livable as possible. These people are sharecroppers. And Washington says because he was the guest, he got the one plate and the one fork that they had
mhm,
at their disposal. The father and the son, they get up and they eat with their hands directly out of the one pan that they had. Washington wanted to know what these people needed as far as an education goes. You got to remember, these are Black folk in Alabama in 1890. Okay. So he watched the mother, and she's tidying up the home. And keep in mind, Black men during this time, even during this time, there was something to be said about our manhood that we didn't want our woman to be working in the field. She was, for all intents and purposes, a stay-at-home mom, a homemaker. And if you look at some of the interviews that Black folk gave back then, one of the things they would say is to white landowners, your woman don't work in the field, so why you want my woman to be working in the field? But
mhm,
Washington eventually goes and he's watching a father who is trying to plow a field. He has a mule or something that's helping him plow the field. And it dawns on him after watching him for a while, where's the son at?
mhm,
So he goes to find the son. And he says he finds the son in a dilapidated shanty, grass grown up all around him, dirty face, unwashed face, as Washington terms it, um, un, un, unbrushed teeth, okay, uncombed hair, reading Plato.
mhm,
Now, regardless of how this man, this young boy, he can master the Iliad all he wants to, but how will that improve his life?
It's not really.
And that's kind of Washington saying, quite simply, at this moment, at this time, we need to do something a little bit different. What are we the masters of? I remember listening to Minister Farrakhan talk, and I want to say it was the speech that he gave where he said the black community is like a big nutritious breast, and every immigrant group that comes here latches on to it, and the poor black businessman tries to get on it, and he can't. You keep moving the breast. You won't let him get no nourishment. This reverberating question of what's wrong with you? Can't you get milk from a cow?
Mm-hmm.
And what Washington is trying to teach them is quite simply, you are the experts already. Who knows how to grow cotton better than we do? Who knows how to handle livestock better than we do? All you need is a little business acumen, maybe some startup capital, and you in business. And in many ways, what Washington is talking about is that's our economic niche. That's how you provide for your family. And let's be honest. If we go back to the 1970s, maybe the 80s, I think it was the 70s. If it was the 80s, it was the early 80s. Remember the Weather Girls? These two big black girls.
Is Raining Men?
Well, yeah, they had that, but they also had ain't nothing going on
But the
but
rent.
the rent. Okay. So in many ways, when you're talking to, except for extreme nonsensical, ignorant black women, if you would ask black women what are the three things that they look for when they're looking for a husband and what have you, I guarantee you provider and protector will be there. So if we're talking about that, and black men can't be gainfully employed either by white folk or of their own volition, you're in many ways not even marriageable because you can't provide.
So what was Booker T giving them? What was he teaching them in college? Just menial labor, or was he teaching them, the science? I guess teaching them how to be teachers. What were the courses that they could learn?
See, this is where the hatred for Washington comes.
Okay.
Because truthfully, we're not real clear about that. Truthfully, we're not. Booker T. Washington, for my money, is the greatest con man to ever exist. Okay.
You just said he's the greatest con man to ever exist.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Booker T. Washington is the greatest con man to ever exist. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
Okay? And I'm serious. He's the greatest con man to ever exist. I mean, think about his task. It's 1890, and Booker T. Washington has to raise money. Okay, let's it's 2024 right now, correct?
Right.
Let's knock the FAFSA and financial aid out right now. How many black folk going to college?
Probably not a lot.
Because we ain't got it like that.
Right.
And this is 2024. So you're talking about 134 years back. Booker T. Washington's task is Herculean. He's got to convince white folk who have money, many of them being, and keep in mind, if they had money in the South, they were slave owners. Okay. He got to go into a room and convince slave owners to give money to black folk so that they can go to school and uplift themselves. How do you do that? You got to con them. And a lot of the people who come out of the Washingtonian school, some of the stories are absolutely hilarious. Booker T. Washington would, and I'll say this about Washington as well, nobody gave more money to the NAACP than Booker T. Washington. Nobody. He gave more money to the NAACP than anybody else. But Washington knows that his access to capital, his ability to uplift black folk, is tied to white dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So when they came, and I'll give you one of the funny stories of the sister who started a school. Washington had given her his approval, and she is teaching the classics. Okay, she's teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, and what have you. And the white folk are coming to check to see what's being taught because they gave the money. And if they gave, I mean, come on now, if we going on a chicken run and I gave the money, I should be able to dictate where we getting the chicken from. Okay. She gives this hilarious account of learning that the white superintendent and these white bigwigs are coming. And she's supposed to be teaching agriculture and vocational. So she said she could think of nothing else to be able to fool these white folk the next day than to tell all of her kids to bring an animal. You go on, bring your horse, bring your cow, bring a chicken, bring something. So when the white folk got there, that's what they saw. Booker T. Washington is kind of out of the same vein. Every class that came through Tuskegee constructed a building. Everyone. Now, can you construct a building without mathematics? Okay. They made their own bricks. They're doing all of these technical sciencey things that are equipping their students to go forward in life, to be able to secure some money. So Booker T. Washington, you can't look at him, you can't look at what he says in public and evaluate him. Okay. Another Booker T. Washington story is Washington was out begging for money, basically, from these white folk. And the white guy got tired of listening. He says, listen, I'm not going to sit here all goddamn night and listen to this nigga talk. When Mamie knows how to spit in the pot to tell if it's hot. And Booker T. Washington doesn't break character. He says, sir, the goal of education at Tuskegee is to teach her to not spit in a pot because it's unsanitary. In that moment, he's convincing white folk of what?
That they're gonna spit in your pot if you know.
Well, no, if you help educate us, you give a donation, we'll be better workers for you.
I know something had happened and they wanted, Booker T to speak out against it, but he couldn't say, what he would like to have said because of, the school, and he didn't want
because of the funding.
Yeah, and he didn't want white folks to burn it down if they didn't like what he said. Now being that said,
wait, I can't let you go forward.
Okay.
But you reminded me of a story. Booker T. Washington talks about being in a meeting at Tuskegee with some of his most trusted aides. And he says that all of a sudden he's got this banging on the front door. Okay, now who'll be knocking on the president's door like that? Washington gets up and he goes to the front door. And there's a young African-American male, perspiring, disheveled. He's clearly been running. He's out of breath. And he says, Mr. Washington, they're accusing me of raping a white girl in the next city. They're trying to lynch me. And Booker T. Washington writes in his journal. He kept a journal. He says, I quickly stepped back from the door and with all my might slammed it in his face. Now, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't think that was the. I don't think that was the right move, but I do understand that if the crackers was looking for him and they found him at that school,
They're gonna burn
then
that whole school down.
everything is going down. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. That story stood for like 30, 40 years until his daughter, and you can imagine if your father did as much for black folk as her father did, and he's remembered as they would put it, although it's the wrong term, an Uncle Tom.
Hmm.
Okay. She released the second half of that journal entry. And that second half of that journal entry says Booker T. Washington says, I hurried back to the meeting, grabbed my two most trusted aides, informed them of the situation, and told them to go get one of the wagons that we had constructed specifically for these types of moments. It had a false bottom. They grabbed that young man, put him at the bottom of that wagon, and in 3 days he was in Canada safe.
Hmm.
And that's my thing when people judge Washington, they they really don't understand what they're seeing, because here you have a man who has his hat in hand and is friends with Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ford, and you know what you got to do with that ilk and class of white folk. You know what you got to do with white folk in general, especially when you want something from them. Okay, but at the same time, this is a man that's funding black schools that are not agricultural and vocational, and using that money for to support civil rights organizations like the NAACP. But he could never let anyone know.
Then I mean I can understand them not letting that kind of information out, back then. But we're in a modern time now. Why
Mhm.
is that information not known on Front Street? What have they done to, what has the school done to propagate, to give people a better image, a better understanding of who Booker T was?
I can't answer that. I can't. I honestly cannot answer that. But the journal entry and the writings of Booker T. Washington are public record. They're out there, And one of the fallacies that we have is quite simply that Washington and Du Bois didn't really get along.
Right.
Well, they just had two different philosophies of upliftment of black folk, and they really weren't that different. I work at a school where every summer Booker T. Washington was there every single summer, walking the yard.
Mm.
Okay, because we produced a humongous percentage of black educators, and Booker T. Washington was in many ways, as young folk would say, the plug. He was the one that could get you placed where you wanted to be.
Mm. And
Okay.
so now Booker T came right after Frederick Douglass,
Yes.
right?
Well,
Now,
well, I mean, he's born. They're both alive at the same time,
mhm,
but Booker T. Washington is not a leader at that time.
okay. And would you have say him and Fred would have been on the same plan?
I don't know. I don't know because Douglas is number one, not from a different region, but he's existing in a different region. And Douglas's idea of racial uplift would closely mirror Du Bois, because these are two educated black men who are outside of the South. Okay. And Booker T. Washington isn't Frederick Douglass. Okay. Douglass was liable to say anything, but Douglas's power is not tied to wealthy white folk who, at a moment's notice, can stop funding.
Mhm. Well, what was his contribution to black people?
Who is his?
Fred.
I mean, Frederick Douglass is arguably the greatest abolitionist to ever exist. You have to remember that Douglass is working right alongside William Lloyd Garrison, and him and Garrison actually have a significant falling out because Douglass wants to speak his own mind and his own story, and white abolitionists don't agree with that type of thing. You know, but Douglass is the statesman. You got to remember, Douglass is the one who tells Lincoln, "Sir, I believe that you're fighting this fight with a good left hand behind your back," telling Lincoln that we need to enlist and arm black men for the U.S. Civil War.
So, because what I'm trying to do, what I would like to be able to do, is kind of like show, um, Fred was first, then Booker T, and I guess after Booker T, WEB took the scene.
No, no, no.
No?
These I remember that Washington and Du Bois are alive at the same time. They're
Hmm.
just publicly they're ideologically irreconcilable. You have to remember that the initial reaction of W.E.B. Du Bois to Booker T. Washington is to support him, and it isn't until Du Bois is going to be taken to task by other black intellectuals. There's this scathing essay written about Du Bois, and it says we must remember that he is but a boy, meaning that Du Bois didn't know what he was talking about.
Mm.
Okay. And then later, when we get to Souls of Black Folk, and you got to remember that he actually dedicates an entire chapter of his book to Booker T. Washington, of Mr. Booker T. Washington and others,
Hmm.
where he's asking these probing questions like, who's going to teach at your schools if you're not producing teachers? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Yet, at the same time, Du Bois is the writer for the Crisis, the NAACP's literary organ, and we now know that Booker T. Washington was the greatest funder of the NAACP during that time.
Why didn't the boys teach at Tuskegee then?
Why didn't he teach at Tuskegee?
Yeah, was he even offered that?
Well, I mean, you got to remember that Du Bois he starts his Du Bois is a whole different character. But Du Bois is going to it's not Grambling. Where did Du Bois go? Du Bois initially wanted to go to Harvard,
Hmm.
and they wouldn't accept him. They didn't believe a Negro could be that smart. And so Du Bois ends up at an HBCU. What was the HBCU that Du Bois went to? Fisk, Fisk University. And that's where he did the study, the Philadelphia Negro, and all of that. And later, Harvard come a calling, and they allowed him to join there. And so Du Bois ends up with a PhD from Harvard, but then he goes abroad and is close, but never finishes a second PhD in economics at the University of Berlin. So in many ways, you're talking about a Negro who was doctor, and he comes back. Harvard ain't hiring that Negro. Princeton ain't hiring him. Yale ain't hiring him. He ends up at Wilberforce University. Wilberforce or Central State, they're right across from each other. So he had to go to a HBCU.
Mm. Wow, wow. So with Booker T and starting Tuskegee and funding other HBCUs,
Mhm.
um,
And you got to remember, and this is my greatest claim to being a Washingtonian. You got to remember that if how we talk about such and such begat so and so, and they begat and they begat. Well, Booker T. Washington, the man that he begat ideologically is Marcus Mosiah Garvey.
how was that?
Okay, Garvey loved Booker T. Washington's program, and Garvey was actually coming to America to meet Washington. Washington dies while Garvey's en route. Okay.
Mm.
And when you look at Booker T. Washington's program of collectivist economics of black folk, you need your own farm, you need your own stores, you need your own teachers, you need everything that white society has. You need that as well.
Mm.
Is that not Marcus Garvey's UNIA
Mm.
with the Black Nurses Guild?
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact same program. Whose parents were Garveyites? Malcolm's. Okay. Does the Nation of Islam not have their own farms?
Mm-hmm.
Are they not constantly talking about circulating the dollar? That's
Mm-hmm.
Booker T. Washington. You know, I tell people Nation of Islam is nothing but, the Tuskegee plan with Assalamu alaikum on top of it. You know, it is talking about black independent economics and politics. Okay. And less concerned with what the outside world is doing. If black folk are doing what it is that they're supposed to be doing economically, politically, socially, culturally, you ain't even got to worry about white folk because they can't compete. They can't compete with you if you're doing that.
Yeah, but the nations playing in Booker T, there are differences because
Of
the
course,
nations
there's going to be some
should
differences.
Not trying to work with the cracker at all. We need to build up and do ourselves in the hell with them.
Yeah, but you're at a different point when you're talking about black economics. Booker T. Washington is dealing with a situation where there is no dough. These people are sharecropping.
Mm-hmm.
They're never paid.
Mm-hmm.
There's no dough. So even if you had your stuff up and running, there's no money to circulate. And so in many ways, what Washington is doing is he's penetrating the white world and saying, listen, help us help you. And he's very convincing in doing it. He's so convincing in doing it that he even fooled black folk that that's what he was doing.
Right, but he still wanted us to embrace. He wanted the actual integration to get along with the races. He wanted that. I mean, we could look at Booker T's message and say really that the illegals that's coming into America,
Mm-hmm.
if they adopted Booker T. Washington's plan, they would even probably fit in better than anybody else, almost to an extent.
I would argue they have adopted his plan.
Mm.
Being down here, when I drive past a construction site and I pay close attention to it, you're lucky if you see one brother out there working. The rest of them are all Hispanic, some form of Hispanic. Okay. When you look at doing yards, lawn service, what have you, they got an economic niche on that. That's where many of them get their foothold in. And that was Washington's point right there. Washington said, monopolize brick making, monopolize these trades and things like this, because these trades are going to be indispensable. Mm. And if you're talking about being a man, having a family, you're going to need to have some economic wherewithal. In the situation that we're in right now, we've gotten to the point where we're beggars upon white folk. We're beggars. There's no other way to even look at it. In this season of our, we're producing another generation, another class of black college graduates. Where they plan on working. And for many of them, and we got to remember, even their families, the epitome of having made it is going to work for Microsoft. You're a computer engineer. and you're going to go, or you're an architect, you're some type of engineer. Your goal is to go work for a white corporation.
So when do you know how many classes Booker T got to see graduate from Tuskegee? Do we know that number?
Yeah, I mean, it was in the 20s of those who graduated.
And then and out of those classes that graduated,
Hmm.
how many became went into business and
Oh,
you know
the vast
and
majority. The vast majority did, because in many ways they had no choice, because white corporations are not in any way going to be reaching out to hire Negroes during that time. They want to get their own people to do that. Well, Washington, once again, Washington was on my campus every single summer, hiring and recruiting teachers. Okay. So when you're talking about the educated population of Black America pre-integration, they're within the community. If there's nothing that racial segregation gave us, it was defined parameters to where you could live. Now, the teacher and the undertaker maybe didn't live on the same street as the drunkard, but they were still within the same community. You know, you for me, I had a teacher that, I swear for God, I hated. I hated Miss Jones. Ironically, that was her name, Miss Jones. I hated her. Okay, at a level that was, it was like she was hazing me.
mm,
Okay, I have notorious bad handwriting to this day. My handwriting is bad. And Miss Jones, I was in sixth grade when I had her. She would take my work, collect it with everybody else's, and when she returned it to me, she would write on top of it in red, "This is not college level. Do it again." I grew to hate that Black woman. Okay. And as a 10, 11-year old, I didn't understand what she was doing. Okay. Um, she was so far on my mind, brother, that I'm at Sunday school, and my Sunday school teacher, Garen Tate asked if, he ended our Sunday school class. It was a Black male Sunday school class. He would always end it with, "Does anyone have any special prayer or request for for the Lord?" Man, I went in front of the class and asked God to kill Miss Jones.
oh my God.
I said, "Would you please just take her off of the face of the planet Earth?" Okay. I get to school. Guess what?
Mm.
She's standing there with a grin on her face. And she says, "I guess the Lord didn't work fast enough." Okay. I'm I go home and I'm telling my mother about this, right? And my mother stopped and turned and looked at me, and she said, "Do you know what a maiden name is?" And I'm like, "No." She said, "Well, that's the name of a woman before she gets married. Miss Jones is married. Her husband's name is Jones. You know what her maiden name is?" I
What?
said, "No." "Tate." She said, "Your Sunday school teacher is her brother.
Mm.
So if you want to know how she found out, he went home and told her that you had wished death, you had prayed death on her." But
Mm.
and then I learned that Miss Jones and my mother were friends going through school.
Mm.
That residential housing segregation meant that all of us were together. So if you went to school and you studied agriculture, you would have a farm and we would have a farmer's market. Okay, because white folk are not going to be as welcoming in as when we go, and they ain't as welcoming to us in their businesses right now.
Mm.
So that's where you would get your Black business class coming from, a place like Tuskegee, coming from a place like Hampton. Okay. So Washington is creating them, okay, helping to create these young folk. He is the lead horse as far as going out and begging for money for white folk, convincing them that they should give money. Because if they don't give money, and he says this in the Atlanta Compromise, he said, you'll either have 4 millions of hands helping to pull the load up, or you'll have 4 million pulling it down, because we'll have no choice, because we'll be poor, penniless, uneducated.
Interesting, interesting. Do you know, or do you know who graduated from Tuskegee of any prominence?
You know what? No, I don't. I don't know. I can tell you. I can tell you who the most famous people to come out of Tuskegee, Alabama are.
Mm-hmm.
The Commodores.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Wow. But when we're looking at the okay, well, let me ask you this first. Do you think that there was since, because Booker T died 59, 60?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. No. No.
I
Booker
mean
T.
his age. His age.
Oh,
Was
I
he
thought you meant 1959,
no,
1960.
mm-mm.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
his age.
He was around that age. Yeah.
So he was, not he would I wouldn't consider him old. He still has some young time in there.
Nah. I don't know, because I have a colleague right now, Lee McGriggs, Dr. McGriggs, and Dr. McGriggs came out of retirement to come back and teach, because he was basically bored at home, and his son had some kids, and he wanted to put money away for their college education and things like that. And he said this to me. He says, "Yeah," he said, "you got to remember that 70 for us is not 70 for our grandparents, because they had to work in them fields and they wore their bodies out." So you're talking about a man who, from the age of probably 7, 8, 9 years old, was working in a mine in West Virginia. In Washington, as a child, had 2 jobs. So that, you know, I don't know, if I can say that, because, and let's be honest, that, and this is one of my telltale signs, that I'm getting older. I went and looked at my Social Security, how long I got to work, and things like that, and what kind of money I should be looking forward to, and this and that. Until recently, and I remember these debates, and I think that they were in jest, half-hearted, but it's only been the last 10 to 15 years that Black men have lived to 65.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we died early. Yeah.
Mm.
So early that they were actually, people said, look at, they messing with us, because they moved the retirement age to 67.
Mm.
Okay. And there were some debates, some congressional debates, about moving that marker to 62 for Black men, because we were never receiving anything out of Social Security.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's this newfangled thing of being healthy into your 70s, 80s. People are living longer. It's one of the reasons, ironically, that that is one of the things, ironically, that when you look at it and you really think about it, that Black folk in general now are living so much longer and healthier lives. Even today, okay, when you really think about it, Black men, remember the Tom Joyner morning show, where he had that great push of take a Black man to the doctor?
Mm.
Black men, by and large, to this very day, don't go to the doctor. We
Mm-hmm.
looked at going to the doctor in the same way that our community looked at mental health. Man, I ain't going over and getting no shrink.
Mm-hmm.
And we're dying. I mean, I hate to associate the brother with this, Chadwick Boseman. That brother didn't have to die if he had went and got checked.
Mm.
But we don't do that. And if we didn't do that, if we don't do that in 2024, you know good and well that we ain't doing that back in we couldn't do it in 1890.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I want to take the second out to welcome Brother Roy to the program. Peace and blessings, Big Brother Roy. Is glad to see you. I want to welcome Mayat to the program. Peace and blessings, Queen. It's good to see you as well. Mayat says, by the way, walked 500 miles to get to a school he didn't
Booker T.
even know
Washington.
if he would be accepted into. Yeah,
Washington,
they long
Washington's
them miles.
look at Washington's story on getting to Hampton. You know, he's first generation. I'm first generation. Let me ask you this: when you went off to school, what did your people say to you when you went to school? What was their advice?
Don't go there playing around. Make sure you get your education.
Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Don't make us look bad.
Okay. Okay. Booker T. Washington's family, they ain't never been in no school. Their advice to him was don't trust strangers.
Mm.
And on his way to Hampton, he met a brother that I'm sure many of us have met. I call him Mr. Me Too.
Mm.
Okay. Now, you act like you Booker T. Washington. Okay. And you on your way to Hampton. And I'm going to be Mr. Me Too. Okay. So brother, where you going?
I'm going to Hampton.
Me too.
Yeah.
Now, you do know that Hampton don't start for another 2 weeks. And I don't know about you, but for me, money is a major issue. So what about if when we get to Hampton, okay? When we get to Hampton, we get a room and we split the cost. Okay. We go ahead and split the cost, and then after 2 weeks, you go your way and I go my way.
Mm-hmm.
What's your response?
Yeah, sounds all right.
All right. Booker T. Washington writes, after walking that long way, I was exhausted. So as soon as we got in the room, I fell asleep and I slumbered hard. And when I woke up, all of my money was gone.
Mm.
What was the one job that you had?
Don't trust strangers.
Don't trust strangers. And what did he do? And I mean,
Trust
you have to think that these people are working in coal mines. They're doing day work. They're keeping house for white folk, and they saved up enough money to send that big-headed, ignorant boy off to school. And what he do with it? You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
There's his story is in many ways miraculous when you really think about it. But you have to. For me, if you look at Washington's program, the idea of Black folk working with their hands, getting a skill, having and his argument is a sound one. Do you think white folk know how to grow cotton? Do you think that they know how to cultivate rice? No, we did that. That's our skill set. Being a blacksmith, we know how to do that. So all I got to do is kind of teach you the rudimentary parts of running a business, and you should be on your way.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, very interesting. I want to welcome Mr. Adolfi to the program. Peace and blessings, big bro. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, we're glad you're here.
We ain't gonna jump on you.
We gonna jump on you. We gonna jump because we know you a brother that'll say something back. Well, y'all sometimes y'all don't even show up.
Definitely. Maya said he even slept under sidewalks in freezing cold because the whites wouldn't allow him inside their inns. He left home with a nickel and a biscuit.
Yeah, I mean, you have to really think about um, stepping out on faith like that. In Washington, he talks about getting to Hampton, and they
Hmm.
put him in charge of some Native American indigenous men. And Washington talks about admiring how they would not compromise upon their culture. He said
Hmm.
they won't even stay in a building. They pitch teepees on the yard, trying to hold on. And of course, we know the stories of now of white folk trying to force these native indigenous people to assimilate to them.
Hmm. The how much do you know what it how much he charged the students to go there, or was it free? Was the education?
It had to be very modest, if anything,
Hmm.
because once again, his funding money after a certain point, money is not going to be a major issue at Tuskegee.
Hmm.
Um, if he's pulling in enough money from his donors to be able to funnel it to civil rights organizations, money wasn't an issue for Washington. Washington is doing what many people would term God's work by trying to uplift the downtrodden.
Mm.
And and you have to think when you look at Garvey's UNIA, it's almost a replica of what Booker T. Washington is doing. We have to remember that Garvey was a master printer. And so
Hmm.
Garvey had, yeah, you're correct. And Garvey, Garvey's he used that skill to go to throughout the Caribbean, to Europe. Ironically, he never made it to Africa. But does that not sound like Booker T. Washington's philosophy? That if you get a skill, if you have a trade, you can use that to barter and to do some things. Maya brings up this idea of the bricks. Booker T. Washington operated out of this very interesting ethos that excellence would trump race.
Hmm.
And if you think about a builder, if a builder wants quality bricks, it would be Tuskegee's bricks. They had perfected bricks. They were saying their bricks lasted 400 years. So if you had the choice between bricks that last 25 years, 50 years, or 400 years, okay, which one you going with?
Hmm.
Even if the people who are producing the 400-year bricks are black.
Hmm. Now, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Now that you on mute, Doc.
Go ahead.
So, so that happened in 32.
Hmm.
So you're looking at 15, 16, 17 years after Booker T has passed.
Hmm.
They would allow this on the campus. Um,
The bad blood experiment.
exactly. So that's not something, or am I assuming? But that's not something that Booker T would allow. Correct?
I can't imagine he would allow that.
Right.
I can't
So
imagine that.
how did they make the split from just leaving what his philosophy was, what his thinking on behalf of our people, to allow something like that? Um,
That's a question, honestly, I can't answer. I would need to know who was the president, why they had decided to do something like that. I can't answer that. That's post Booker T. Washington. But what I can tell you is that black folk, by and large, were left out, and even to this day, black folk are left out of medical studies. We talked about the sickle cell anemia, and the Black Panther Party for Self Defense being the first ones to come up with centers to test for sickle cell anemia throughout Black America. I would like to know, and of course, it's something that can't be talked about. Did they know what was going on, the ins and outs of it? Did they know? Um, and I mean the administrators of the institution. Did they actually know what was occurring? Because now, in hindsight, after everything has occurred, it's easy to sit up and write what was occurred, what happened, what they actually did. But I would like to know, what did they know? Did these men were they aware of that, or were they being and I guarantee you that there was a some monetary incentive to participate in not only that study, but I would argue every study. Hell, these medical studies that they're doing now, they give you an incentive, to participate. I read about an incentive because you're in the medical field, and the idea, I guess, the idea of the flu shot is they give you a dormant version of it so that you can't catch it.
Yeah,
I
so
read,
you fight it off.
yeah, I had read a study where they were trying to do that with HIV, and they
Mm.
had got these guys from they were from like a third world country, and they thought that they were shooting them up with a dormant HIV virus, and in time they all developed full blown AIDS. So medical advancement, but I can't tell you what was said and how they got into Tuskegee.
Mhm. Do uh, any of Booker T. Washington's children, did they follow in his footsteps to run the school or anything like that?
The only child I've ever that I knew he had, or I've ever heard anything about, was that daughter who released a journal entry, and she became a nurse. So other than that, I don't know. I don't know if he had additional children, or she's the only one I've read about because of that journal entry that she
Mhm.
released.
Yeah, he supposedly had three, two girls and one boy. Boy name is Booker T. Washington Jr.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Never. He's never appeared in anything that I've read.
Mm. Wow. Interesting. Very interesting. Um, you know, he was, a counselor, or I don't know what you want to call somebody give, Theodore Roosevelt advice.
Yeah. Well, I
How
mean,
did,
you got to remember that Booker T. Washington's the man. By after he gets that Atlanta Compromise speech,
Mhm,
he's the man. He becomes, and it goes back to that old tradition. Um, the preacher was usually the most educated one within the community. So
mhm,
any dealings that they had with black folk, they would go get the preacher and talk to
mhm,
him. It's an outgrowth from that. But go ahead, bro.
mhm. So, but as being a counselor to the president, Theodore Roosevelt, and so you're saying that the Atlanta speech is what opened that door for him to be, talking with the president.
Yeah, it's that speech that endears Booker T. Washington to white America. Okay, I mean, if you go back and you read that, you look at that speech, some of the things that he's saying in that speech, white women, and you got to remember, it's at a World's Fair
Mhm,
um, that's held in Atlanta, and I don't want people to think that we're talking about Jermaine Dupri's So So Deaf Atlanta. That ain't the Atlanta we're talking about. There was a great comedian who said that the only problem with Atlanta is that you can drive 20. You can start downtown Atlanta. You can drive 20 minutes in any direction, and your black self is now in Georgia. This is Georgia that we're talking about.
Mhm.
This isn't Atlanta. Atlanta, present day Atlanta. So white folk did not want black people to even come to the World's Fair, and it actually turns kind of it turns public because they're actually writing letters and editorials in the newspaper about Negroes stay home, because there is no better place, no better example of your intellectual inferiority than a World's Fair. Because when you think about it, they're going to debut the telephone there. They're going to debut a new, more efficient, modern steam engine. And what's going to be y'all contribution? Y'all gonna run what George Washington Carver out there again?
Mm.
31 different forms and textures of peanut butter. What's your contribution? And so there's a back and forth that goes on. And eventually they settle upon allowing black folk to come for one day. They call it Negro Day. It's kind of like the Houston rodeo. You got one day. They either gonna put Beyonce up there, Rihanna, or Bun B. Okay, that's Negro Day. And on that day, because these are learned people, they don't have television and what have you. So they go to lectures to learn things and what have you. And a part of the exposition is they would have someone lecture every day. And Booker T. Washington lectures on that day.
Mm.
And when he stepped from behind that curtain, because they don't know who's going to speak, they start jeering him and cussing, yeah, get that nigga off the stage. By the time he was done with that speech, white women were crying and literally took their roses and threw them at his feet, clapping.
Mm.
So that had to be a hell of a speech.
Yeah, it had to
And
be.
with it being a hell of a speech that white folk approved of, this is where the maligning of Booker T. Washington really emanates from. It had to be a disgusting speech for black folk. Because in many ways, what Booker T. Washington is saying is, we want to go back to slavery. The whole idea of what you need to do is go ahead and just continue doing what you did in slavery and freedom. How does that sound? Especially when you take it out of the context of he's conning these white folk to get their money. Okay. Can we take a look at the speech?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
I mean, and if you put it through the idea that he's conning them, I think it's a whole lot more palatable in understanding. This part right here, where he talks about a ship lost at sea for many days, suddenly sighted a friendly vessel, and water, water, we die of thirst. In the vessel, they said, cast down your bucket where you are. Once again, water, water, send us water, cast down your bucket where you are. The captain of the distressed vessel, at last heeding the injunction, cast down his bucket, and it came up full of fresh, sparkling water from the mouth of the Amazon River. Okay. To those of my race who depend on bettering their condition in a foreign land. Now, in a foreign land, he's talking about going west or going north or going to the Midwest, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the Southern white man who is their next door neighbor. I would say cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down and making friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded. Okay. Now, just in and of itself, the words, ah, but when you understand he's trying to con them is something different. Um, Cast it down in agriculture, mechanics, and commerce, and domestic service, and in the professions, all things that we've done previously. Okay. Our greatest danger is that in the great leap from slavery to freedom, we may overlook the fact that the masses of us are to live by the productions of our hands and fail to keep in mind that we shall prosper in proportion as we learn to dignify and glorify common labor and put brains and skill into the common occupations of life. Okay. We shall prosper in proportion as we learn to draw the lines between the superficial and the substantial, the ornamental gewgaws of life and the useful. This is important. No race can prosper till it learns that there is as much dignity in tilling a field as in writing a poem. It is at the bottom of life we must begin and not at the top. Nor should we permit our grievances to overshadow our opportunities.
Mm. Mm.
Now, in and of itself, you hear what? This Negro trying to get us back into slavery. Talking about start at the bottom and what have you. But there's really no other way to convince these white folk to give money.
Mm.
And you have to remember that the year prior to the Atlanta Cotton Exposition speech, and this is one of the things that really angered many black folk, was that an octoroon, okay, by the name of Homer A. Plessy, got on a train and tried to challenge segregation on the train. The case sat open for about 2 years because the Supreme Court doesn't know how to rule on it. And eventually they do rule on it after Booker T. Washington gave this speech where he said black folk don't want equality, black folk don't want to vote. We just want to work better for white folk. The Plessy v. Ferguson decision came down and it basically said that separate but equal is constitutional. That's 1896, and that'll remain the rule of law until 1954 with the Brown decision, where Brown won. So Washington's speech had some damage, led to some damage. White folk believe that, and that's what caused so many black intellectuals, black leaders to speak out against him.
Mm. Wow, very interesting. Very interesting. Maya says she wonders how many black men got lynched thereafter.
Well, I mean, you gotta remember that Rayford Logan refers to 1877 as the nadir, the worst moment for black folk. So black folk were getting lynched already. And in many ways, it's kind of what spurs Booker T. Washington to kind of give this speech. This idea that we will submit because there's no one coming to help you. You got to remember the Republican Party has already left. All the troops are gone. They went north to deal with the Irish, the Polish, the Russians, the Slavs, with the Industrial Revolution. We have no friends. Like John Henry Clark said, we have no friends. And so that's actually what Homer A. Plessy was trying to do when he got on that train, to force the Republican Party to come back into the South and deal with this issue. It doesn't work.
Mm. Wow, very interesting. Well, I guess really say he was a true believer, thinking that we would have better relations with them by just doing the menial chores and not looking to, I guess,
Well,
outsmart them.
yeah, I mean, not issuing a direct challenge, because you're not going to be able to weather the storm that these people have already shown you the levels of violence and immorality that they're willing to go to. So in many ways, what Washington is doing is putting up a fence around Black America. Okay. telling them, listen, no, we're not going to challenge the status quo, because to challenge the status quo means quite simply that we will be what? Slaughtered. These are people who are burning black men, black women, and black children at the stake.
Mm, 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 mm.
And
Well,
yet,
I think it you know, and it gives something to that thought of sometimes you just got to go there,
mhm,
even if it means that we all gonna die. But it's better to die fighting
mhm,
than to just let them pick you off.
mhm,
You know, they wrote this poem that I'm going to go over when he was in the White House, because
mhm.
you know, he got to, you know, stay in the big house. Uh,
You say you got to stay in the big house, huh?
yeah, he got to stay in the big house. Now, this is a poem that they ran in different newspapers about Booker T. Washington and
Mhm,
Roosevelt. Niggers in the White House. Things at the White House looking mighty curious. Niggers running everywhere, white people furious. Niggers on the front porch, niggers on the gable. Niggers in the dining room, niggers at the table. Niggers in the sitting room making all the talk. Niggers in the ballroom doing the cakewalk. Niggers in the East Room makes a mighty throng. Niggers in the music room singing a coon song. Niggers in the hallway taking off their wraps. Niggers in the billiard room shooting games of craps. Niggers in the storeroom packing away their plunder. Niggers in the bedroom snoring like thunder. Not a room in the White House without niggers many. Baby in the nursery, a nigger pickaninny. Niggers on the stairway with very much satiety. Niggers in the blue room, a symbol for society. Niggers in the front porch, niggers in the back. Niggers come in omnibus, niggers come in hacks. On the way, on way go to Washington with a mighty rush. 40,000 niggers getting in the push. There is trouble in the White House, more than you can tell, yelling like wild men, niggers raising hell. I see a way to settle it just as clear as water. Let Mr. Booker Washington marry Teddy's daughter. Or if this does not overflow Teddy's cup of joy, then let Miss Diana Washington marry Teddy's boy. But everything is settled. Roosevelt is dead. Niggers in the White House cut off Teddy's head. And
Gotta,
that
lo- gotta love them, don't you? Gotta love them. I mean, and it reminds me of the cadence. Reminds me of Gil Scott Heron's Whitey's on the Moon.
You know, it's you're and my thing, you know, if I could ever have a talk with Booker T,
Mhm.
you know, I would really ask him what would make him think that it would be better to get along as servants
Mm.
rather than, you know, to fight your way and make them respect you, you know, or they be in the goddamn cemetery. Because it
And
was
see,
more of us still at this time than them down there in the South. It was still more of us. We outnumbered them. That's the time right then
yeah,
and there to take it to their ass and give
I
them
mean,
full what they was looking for.
yeah, but see, this is my thing. When you talk about there's more of us than them, I would challenge that And the reason I would challenge that is numerically, you're talking about, you're correct, but their numbers are solidified in hatred of black folk. Our numbers are not solidified. We're not all, if provided the chance, we're not all even willing to strike a blow for freedom. And so you have to wonder how many numbers we actually have. And when you look at, and this is one of the things that a lot of my students get upset with me about when I poke fun at them. I ask them, how many of you are multi-generational Southern? And they're like, oh yeah, my people always been in the South. And I'm talking about the Great Migration, those who left, because my grandparents left, didn't know where they was going, but they left. Okay. And I tell them, I'm like, yeah, okay, well, the courageous people I'm finna talk about right now, ain't y'all scared ass ancestors who wouldn't leave. You have a population of individuals who have somehow gotten into a psychological space of just survive. Even if it means I got to live on my knees, I'm going to survive. Look at Booker T. Washington. Although he's making his moves and maneuvers and what have you, he ensured that his children did better than he did. And there's some liberating part of that I find in there. But to wonder how many of them would strike a blow for freedom, I don't know. Because this is for many of them all they've ever known. And there's some who are going to be born with a revolutionary heart, and their motto will be resistance. Others, I mean, come on, you know it today. How many of our brothers and sisters are going along to get along and don't even want an association with people like us? Okay, because they know that association with someone like us is going to quite possibly compromise their trinkets that they receive from their owners.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, I think those are not the majority. Those are the minority. I think the majority of Black folk, one, don't have an understanding of what to fight for. I
Mm,
think the ignorant masses are the bigger block of Black people.
mm,
But I think they can be pushed in that route so long as if white folks being what they are, and they continually do the same stuff. I think that if you get into that anger and able to tap into that, you can take it all the way. I think you could really be able to take it all the way. But you cannot allow for that cool down period, because once that cool down period comes, you can forget it. They done gone to something else.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this whole thing that we're seeing with Kendrick Lamar and Drake. I'll just say this, and I don't want to get bogged down in this. That's the hot topic of Black America.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And now we didn't. Drake's security guard got shot and
Mm-hmm.
things like, and you're just like, how trivial, how stupid,
Mm-hmm.
with all of the issues that Black folk got going on.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all get lathered up about a damn rap battle for real. And I got some homeboys who are, oh man, you Negroes are in your 50s,
Mm-hmm.
period. So it's I don't know. I don't have the faith that you do that they're going to have, that there's going to be something that kick in, and gets them to a revolutionary place. I don't have that. because I've experienced over and over and over and over and over again the exact opposite, where they're out to see what type of money, what type of award, what type of position that they can get from the majority white society.
Mhm.
And these are individuals who know the history, and they've chosen to use the history as a blueprint to escape any harshness, any punishment.
Mhm. Mhm. Now, do you think if Booker T would have lived, would he have been in agreement with Malcolm X or Martin Luther King? Which one, if any?
Publicly, it would have been King.
Mhm.
Privately, it would have been Malcolm.
Mhm.
Because you have to remember, and this is one of the hardest things to get some of us to understand. Um, do you know how hot it is and how funky it gets for us as intellectuals and professors, especially at these conferences and dealing with these white folk? Oh, it gets funky. We're not in the frying pan. We're being roasted over the fire. And I had a colleague, I won't name him, who said, Jones, we need you here because you're the only one that's got nerve enough to stand up in a room full of white folk and tell them that they ain't shit, and can do it in an academic setting.
Mhm.
I think that Booker T. Washington, because you got to remember, Booker T. Washington was beaten 3 or 4 times in his life.
Mhm.
Okay. And one of the times, sidebar, I don't want nobody to pass judgment on the brother. They found him alone with a white woman. And
Mhm.
that's all the report said, that they found him alone with a white woman. Now, I don't know, if he was clothed, if he was not clothed or what, but they jumped on that brother and beat him down like 3, 4 flights of stairs.
Mhm.
I think that he gets a chance to see them in a way that we don't. And the fact that you got to go in front of them and they know it and beg them for money. Many people would look at his being in the White House as being, oh yeah, look at him. He think he made it. He going to meet the man. Could it possibly be that he was disgusted that the president could summon him like, boy, come here so I can talk to you?
Mhm. Mhm. I don't know. I mean, I'll say it's possible. It's possible he could have been that way. Um,
See
but
that
I would imagine that would be a hard life to live because you can't be your true self in the light of
certainly.
day.
So think about it. He's giving more money to fighting, white bigotry than anybody else. He's the only game in town. If you want to start a school, them white folk want you to go get a letter from Booker T. Washington. Now, what were those conversations like? Like the sister who was teaching, a classical education and had to have her students, bring horses and cows and shit so they can look like they got a farm or some shit going on there. Um, did Washington know? Probably so. Probably so. It'd be like, oh, okay, okay. Now they're gonna come check, and when they come check, if it ain't right, they're gonna take your funding. And it's one of those where we still are chained in regards to what we can say because they hold the monetary purse strings.
Mhm.
And it's one of the things that makes the exploiting of our people the wasting of time of our people, especially when you're talking about in the educational realm, so despicable. You know.
Interesting, interesting. Um, when it comes to the rest of, because the only thing that really stood out is his educational journey for us to be able to,
Mhm.
teach our own and have our own schools.
Yeah,
And
everything, but for him, everything flows off of education,
mhm.
economics, all of it. You know, as a man thinking.
But he did not teach his students or about we need to be separate. He wanted us to be integrated.
But I
Um,
mean, is that something that you need to teach
yes,
in
yes,
1890?
yes. It is.
No.
It is
What's the
because
option?
because if you don't teach that you need to be separate, then they're going to do exactly what they did, which is trying to be integrated, which means I want you to be my friend. We're gonna fit in and do whatever so we can have good relations. And I think that's a problem when you want to have good relations with a people who don't want to have good relations with you. They want
Wait
you
a minute, but
dead,
hold
and
on,
you
hold
want
on, hold on.
everybody.
I think you've fallen into that trap. Are we talking about um are we talking about Booker T. Washington's actual philosophy? Because I'm one of those pay attention to what they do, not to what they say. Because this is the man who created more black businesses than any man in this nation until Garvey got here. Nobody created more black businesses than Booker T. Washington. Now, is he saying cultivate like in the speech, cultivate friendly relations with your southern white? That's part of the con for me. Because if he's not saying that, you're not going to get any school off the ground. You can't go up there. He couldn't be William Monroe Trotter. Okay, Trotter. You want to read about a brother who look here, man. William Monroe Trotter. Pardon my French. He was a nigga. Okay, a Harvard trained nigga who had no impulse control at all. I want to say it was Roosevelt that Trotter went up into the White House. Man, he cussed the president out. Okay.
Wow.
And the president said he would not meet with another black person until they publicly denounced William Monroe Trotter. If
Mm,
you want to meet with the president, he's willing to meet with you, but only after you denounce Trotter.
mm,
Okay. Trotter, um, and think about it this way. You can't go to even a medium-sized city in America and not find a Booker T. Washington something,
mhm,
school and what have you. You'll never find a William Monroe Trotter anything. Okay. Trotter, to show you some of the antics of him, Du Bois had to talk to Trotter and be like, "Hey man, would you stop it?" Trotter and his sister showed up at a Booker T. Washington speech. Yes, exactly. Um, and Washington is on stage lecturing. William Monroe Trotter ran up on the stage, and you got to think about LeBron James. You ever seen LeBron when he check into a game and he put the powder on his hand and do that? William Monroe Trotter jumped on that stage and threw powder on Booker T. Washington, slapped his ass in the face.
mm.
Said, "You want to be white? Now you look white." Okay. Now that's memorable, but Trotter can't go nowhere and ask nobody for no money to start nothing.
Mm,
Okay. Trotter's crazy. Okay.
mm.
And when you have the boys, somebody that's on your side that has to tell you, look, man, you got to cut that out, because all you doing is legitimizing this man and this philosophy even more, because they're looking at it like, what's the alternative? Go over here and deal with a nigga that's then cuss the president out, runs up on stage. He would take a bucket of powder, and if he could get close enough to Booker T. Washington, he would throw the whole bucket on him. Now, it's hilarious, it's memorable, but it's not gonna take us anywhere. And that's what Washington is by and large. When you look at the totality of what it is he did, that's what he's trying to do. He's not William Monroe Trotter. Okay. Now Trotter, come on now. You went to the White House and cussed the president out.
Wow.
What you think coming next? You jumping on stage just slapping Booker T. Washington with two hands of powder. You want to be white, you talk white, you act white.
Wow.
Come on, man. Come on.
So which president did he cuss out?
I want to say it was Roosevelt.
Wow.
But I would have to look that up for you.
Very, very, very interesting. I didn't know nothing about Trotter.
Yeah,
he sounds like somebody I would like.
Trotter's the first Negro to graduate from Harvard. Okay, and it's like, so here you have, this Harvard trained Negro that has probably gone insane. He's the only black. He was there before Du Bois. He's the only black man at Harvard. Ain't no telling what the white folk had done to him. Yeah, William Monroe Trotter. You want to talk about somebody that that just can't get right? That's Trotter. Okay. And Mr. Drophy he's correct. Go against Washington could not afford for you to go ahead and buck the system really in a way that would curtail the money flowing for other folk. You can't pick up no phone and call John D. Rockefeller and get a couple million. Andrew Carnegie get a couple million. And that money to this day, that money is still flowing. Now, you can't get past William Monroe Trotter right about now, can you?
No, I can't. You put somebody on my list that I got to learn about now.
No, man, you don't want to deal with Trotter. Trotter end up getting you arrested.
Wow. So Mr. Dolphin say Booker T was like a mob boss, though.
Yeah.
He would shut down black folks too, buy their papers, mess with their funding. He had big power.
I mean, you have to think that when you get to a level where nobody can get funding unless they have your endorsement, what kind of power is that?
Yeah.
So you look at Trotter right now.
His ass too.
Yeah, he would jump on the stage, run up there, slap him on both sides of his face, leave two white handprints on both sides of his face. Yeah. It was like he was stalking Booker T. Washington. Everywhere Washington would go, they would have to literally be looking out for William Monroe Trotter. And when they was able to identify Trotter, his damn sister jumped up on the stage and threw powder on Booker T. Washington.
Wow.
Yeah, I want to say they took her to jail.
mm, mm,
And this is
mm,
the black elite. This is the black intellectual class that we talking
mm,
about.
mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm. Or maybe they just had enough of playing the fiddle to white folks. Maybe it just
Well,
said, "Shit, I got to have a nigga moment."
well, yeah. I mean, but see, the thing is that you have to situate Booker T. Washington within the South, and understand the hell that black they're burning black folk in the South. You
Hmm.
know, if you can't situate him within the South and within Jim Crow and the black codes, and you may not come home just by looking at somebody, any perceived slight, okay, and it might just be your day. If you can't understand that and comprehend that right there, like Du Bois is a northerner. He's from Great Barrington, Massachusetts. He can't really understand that. You know, you ask why the boys didn't teach at Tuskegee. Shit, he probably was scared of Alabama.
Mm,
He
mm,
went to
mm,
Ohio,
mm.
HBCU still, but no, you have to, you got to situate this man within the proper, even geographical context. Why is he saying what he's saying? And if you miss that, you'll look at him as a sellout. But how can you call a man a sellout if this man created more black businesses than anybody before him?
Mm. I don't know. For me, it takes more than just you made some black businesses. Um, it's like in order to really protect our people,
Hmm?
you're not going to protect them with making black business because the enemy can come and burn that shit down every time you go out there and open it. They can come burn the fuck down. They can come and chase you out of your own business, and next thing you know, it be their business that used to be yours, but they took it and run it from you.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Because see, you have to factor back in there. Like I said, the most famous residents to come out of Tuskegee were the Commodores. So you're in many ways talking about creating several black satellite communities. We talked about it in this space before. That great moment in the movie The Mac, where Roger Mosley says, "What we need to do is create a nation within a nation, but without a nation." That's what Washington is doing. Okay, you have these black satellites that are going on now. Now, are black folk um, always tenuously positioned in regards to their longevity? Always. I mean, you can look at the race riots from 1917 to 1923. Look at Rosewood. When white folk decide they're going to come in, you're going to need to have some gumption and a force that's going to stand up to them.
Mhm.
And that's where individuals like yourself come into. You need to have a warrior class. Booker T. Washington is not telling you not to have a warrior class. Well, Washington, I mean, when you really think about the story of them smuggling that young man to Canada, when you really, really, really think about that story, that's resistance. That's a part of the warrior class, but he's very strategic in regards to doing it.
Yeah, it's you definitely you definitely have to be a certain way in order to conduct yourself in America. Um, well, that's without a doubt. Um, why you don't think that he explained or he wanted even after his death for our people to know that, hey, look, I really was on your behalf. I was sending money here, or I was trying to do this, or I was trying to do that. Why did it go to his grave that you wasn't really on our side?
That money is still flowing.
But if the best that they produce is the Commodores, that's a
No,
problem.
that's not the best. I said the most famous. I didn't say that was the best they produced. I mean, if you look at Booker T. Washington's legacy of teachers and in black businesses and what have you, um, it's monumental for Black America. Okay, and you can't just situate him at Tuskegee. Like I said, every summer he was at Prairie View. Okay, the boys, not every summer, but the boys would also come to PV as well. Okay, so in many ways, you're talking about very complicated men, um, and he created an institution that still is in existence and is still receiving funding from these white sources that he created relationships with.
But if they're not producing nothing really, then
No, no, no,
all
no,
your
no.
money, then
I
who
can't
make
give you
nothing
nothing
out of it?
really. I can't give you nothing really because you have to think about it, and everything is relative. That we're talking about pre 1920s. We're talking about before Garvey got here. That you have a foothold, and make no mistake about it. That how can we even imagine the creation of black businesses within a black community without understanding that those are the seeds sprouting of black nationalism and black nationalist thought. Now, just because it was not written down, it was not recorded, you can't reasonably think that in a place like Tuskegee that they didn't have brothers like you.
I mean, I'm quite sure that they did.
Okay.
Um,
But we can't let you go out there and talk crazy to these white folk. However, we're gonna keep you over here in a glass. And if the shit get real, break that glass and let his ass out. Because you have above and beyond everything else a community. And one of the best things that we have to realize about Booker T. Washington's legacy and the legacy of Garvey, of black race men, is quite simply that they helped us get off of those plantations as far as sharecroppers, where you had what? Physical separation, where they could come and get 3-4 of you and kill you. One of the best things that black folk got when they made it to central cities and what have you was community that they were able to protect. You don't see those lynchings happening in major cities. Now you have the Atlanta race riot that occurs, okay, in the black section of Atlanta. But Walter White, who was the director of the NAACP, Walter White and his family, him and his sons, they're protecting their home. And this is a man who headed the NAACP. And he tells his son, he says, listen, don't shoot, because they're coming into black folks' houses. Okay. He tells his son, he says, listen, don't shoot until the first man sets foot on the grass. And when he does, don't you miss. But we don't talk about these stories, these resistance. Okay. But that resistance is there. And that's the educated bourgeoisie coming out of Atlanta, Georgia. So you know that these country boys that can go out into the woods and hit a deer from 500 yards, you know they handy with a gun. It's just one of those things that for us that we rarely talk about, that resistance. If you go back there, there's a great book about black slave rebellions. And this guy says we're looking at, just from what he could document, 6,800 rebellions, physical rebellions. But we don't write about those and we don't talk about those. All we talk about is Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, then Mark Vesey in the Stonewall Rebellion. But they're much more common. And until we're able to kind of say, yeah. Okay, Booker T. Washington, boom, 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 boom. Let their brother be the face. Let him go talk to them white folks, see what he can get. But if they bring their ass over here, we got something for them. Those two things exist simultaneously. Those two things are not opposed to each other, not in the least bit.
So who was his heir apparent once he died? Who took his spot?
There was no heir apparent. Um, the person who took his spot is a gentleman by the name of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Okay, Garvey was en route, and in many ways, it's almost poetic justice. Garvey's en route to meet Booker T. Washington. He's on his way, and Washington dies. And Garvey gets here, and of course, he has the Caribbean connection, the South American connection, the European connection already, and he creates a international worldwide movement, the UNIA, of Black folk creating their own Black businesses, educating their own, because you got to remember, you're still racially segregated. Even if I didn't go, this is the 1970s. I didn't go to school with white folk until I hit middle school. And that's a non-Southern area. I'm in Ohio. So you're already racially segregated. Malcolm said it best. He said, listen, I ain't worried about you living in a Black community. You're going to always live in a Black community, because as soon as you move in, then white folk going to move out. And that's 1960s, man. So in every way, the idea of cultivating relations with them, Booker T. Washington wants these white folk money. Okay, he knows what the game is, but he's smart and he's savvy and he's wily enough to never say it in public. But he's kicking money to some of these brothers who are less, how can I put it, less finesseful. Okay, send him to get the money. Okay, now we got a school, now we got this, now we got that. What is it beyond the realm of possibility that some of the blacksmithing work that was going on was not producing guns?
I would like to think that they did, but I kind of doubt that they did.
Where the guns come from? Where the ammunition come from? They go buy it from white folk.
Because of and I'll give you this, that I don't know, a lot about Booker T, but only from our conversation now and what I've been listening to as I was at work today. I couldn't see him getting caught making guns with bullets.
He's not going to get caught. He's not going to do that. Yeah, he's not going to do that. But what I'm saying is the institutions and the structures that he creates. You think that some of them brothers wasn't doing that?
I would hope that some of them were. I don't know.
They certainly were. I mean, but see, that's the dilemma of Booker T. Washington, that there's always a curtain in front of you. You don't know what's going on behind that curtain. But what we do know is that it was not uncommon for Black folk to defend themselves. Mm-hmm. We were not willing victims. And the idea that we were willing victims, that's a fucking lie. Okay, but it's a lie that has been propagated in advance for the idea to train up future generations of Black folk, to tell them, look, your little stubby Black arms are too short to box with that white God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, I think that I wish he'd have done a few things a little differently, or maybe simultaneously.
Like what?
And like build a defense force while you still getting your school together and all that, because you got to protect. Hell, make them look like goddamn farmers if you got to. But at the end of the day, when the shit come, then we're gonna deal with it.
But hold on now. Go back to that story of the young man with the wagons with the false bottom. That's
Hmm.
a hell of a clue that they weren't just sitting there. What do we need to protect and defend ourselves? That's a hell of a clue. Okay.
But
Because if they're producing wagons with false bottoms to
mhm.
smuggle black folk out, do you not think that they have munitions and guns that if it really go down that they're able to handle this?
I don't know. There's not enough for me to say. Yes, he had that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the dilemma of Booker T. Washington. That you can never tie Booker T. Washington directly to anything. He never jeopardizes the flow of the money. However, that money didn't just flow into agricultural and industrial education. That money flowed a whole lot of places. Do you think that black businesses that he helped create are sitting there defenseless? Like Walter White told his son. Walter White is the head of the mildest civil rights organization that to ever exist, the NAACP. And he's got guns. Dr. King, people who were inside Dr. King's house, they said, man, it was a fortress. Looked like an armory inside of there. And I think that the big thing is that we have to separate that public face, that best face. Think about it this way. Minister Farrakhan. Okay. Mr. Farrakhan will come up and he'll talk. He's very diplomatic. He can talk with anybody. Okay. But to his over his left shoulder and his right shoulder, you got Khaled and you got Mustafa. Now, when they cut a fool and act a fool, you know it came from him. You know that he created the context and provided the resources for it to occur, but you can never pin it to him. You think the black folk in Alabama? Do you think that any black folk would still exist in the state of Alabama if they weren't protecting themselves? And really in the South, and you're talking about the single most significant, as Mr. Drophy put it, mob boss that we got down there.
Yeah, I think that I believe that they were doing a lot of fighting to
Hmm?
do what needs to be done. I just don't think Booker T had nothing to do with the fighting part. I don't
No,
think.
he probably didn't. He probably didn't, but he provided the monetary resources for it to occur, for some of it to occur. Because you got to think, if I'm training up at Tuskegee, what have you, any of the other black schools that he funded, if they're training up individuals to do whatever, iron work, whatever, you can't tell me that they're not saying, well, no, make some shit so when them white boys come over here, we can address it. We're not going to just sit here as sitting ducks.
But then, Doc, why if we take that view that this is what they was doing,
Hmm?
then when they came to Rosewood, there was no response. When they came to Black Wall Street, I can't say there was no response. There was not a significant response to put that kind of thing down, to dead it, to end it. They
But
were we were overran and ran out of business and ran out of our
yeah, but I
homes
but I but I
and
think that
rioting and all of this.
yeah, but if you look at Black Wall Street, I mean, come on, it would be the equivalent of one of what used to be a historic black neighborhood here. They now call it the economic corridor, but the Fifth Ward. It would be
Mhm.
the equivalent if the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. military decided to attack the Fifth Ward. They dropped bombs on them. They used airplanes on them, X, Y, and Z. So that's kind of a different type of thing. But if you look at urban resistance, you see a different story because we are maybe not, you can't call it a solidarity collective, but there is a interest within our community amongst the masses when we're no longer spread out on plantations to defend oneself.
But that, and I get that, but Booker T worked in the South, not in the North.
Mm-hmm.
So if he was, doing the
Which would,
okay,
which,
we're gonna arm you and make sure we teach you. Then when the stuff happened in was it Raleigh? No, Wilmington, North Carolina.
mm-hmm,
And blacks was running and hiding in the woods. There was
mm-hmm,
no bow back, to beat to put that shit down. So
mm-hmm,
my thing is, if he had all this money he was getting in, and if he was sending it to schools and sending it out to
mm-hmm.
defense, well,
Well,
what
now,
happened?
wait a minute. What I'm saying is, I believe that these different communities are responsible for developing their own defense. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Booker T. Washington was a Union general or whatever. What I'm saying is that when you're looking at his influence in what he was able to bring to the community, which is resources and what have you, he provides an opportunity, a veneer of the potential for defense, okay, for our people.
I think with and I don't know the amount of money, but I believe it was a great deal amount of money. I think some of it should have been used for defense, um, because we just know anything that we build. Well, maybe he didn't know that back then. Maybe he
Well,
didn't know that they would come and destroy. Maybe he didn't know that part.
no,
Given
he had to have known. If he didn't know that, he wouldn't have turned that young man away. You get what I'm saying? You're talking about someone who has spent time in West Virginia, Virginia, and Alabama. Okay. He knows what they're capable of doing. And it's one of the reasons why he is so careful in regards to cultivating an image and how he interacts and talks with them. Okay. He knew, you know, look at this one stanza from the Atlanta Compromise. This is the moment when I'm lecturing to my students. I say his voice is just dripping with honey. Up here, he's talking about don't trust the new immigrants because they go on strikes and labor wars. Okay, and he's telling white folk to cast down their bucket amongst us. Now, listen to how he describes this. Casting down your bucket among my people, helping and encouraging them as you are doing on these grounds, into the education of the head, hand, and heart, you will find that they will buy your surplus land, make blossom the waste places in your field, and run your factories. This is the part. While doing this, you can be sure in the future, as in the past, that you and your families will be surrounded by the most patient, faithful, law-abiding, and unresentful people that the world has seen. As we have proved our loyalty to you in the past in nursing your children, watching by the sick bed of your mothers and fathers, and often following them with tear-dimmed eyes to their graves. So in the future, in our humble way, we shall stand by you with a devotion that no foreigner can approach, ready to lay down our lives, if need be, in defense of yours.
wow,
Okay? And this is
wow,
probably the most classic line from here. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one is the hand in all things essential to mutual progress.
wow.
He's not calling for integration. Booker T. Washington is saying, listen, we know that y'all want separation from us. Okay. And he has a hurdle to jump. What is this ignorant backwaters redneck view of an educated black man? Okay. That view is of a black man with a cane, some white gloves, and a top hat on. And if not checked, hello, I'm here to call on Becky. Booker T. Washington knocks that out from the very beginning. Listen, we ain't trying to date your daughters. We ain't trying to get with y'all. But run that money. Because if you don't run that money, we have to turn to crime. And we're gonna cut your throat as a result of that. There you go. He ain't asking to be near them. In all things purely social, let us be separate as the fingers are to the hand.
Yeah, but when he said that shit about we'll defend your life and all that shit.
You gotta butter them up.
Doing that motherfucker shit.
You gotta butter them up, man. You can't. We gotta follow you with tear-dimmed eyes. You got to butter them up so that they get that money. Okay? Well, here go the money.
I can see now why I try to slap the shit out of him.
I mean, when you take him out of the Southern context, you can see how there could be a major misunderstanding up in here. If you heard him say, "Yeah, we just want to work better for y'all," you got to look at him in the entire context. If you don't, you're gonna be like Trotter, and you running up on stage with like you ain't got no class and slapping people in their face with white powder. I mean, really think about that. Can you imagine what was going through Booker T. Washington's mind when he saw Trotter running on that stage? What do? It's sort of like the Chris Rock Will Smith moment. What was Chris Rock to do? What is this fool doing?
Boy, oh boy!
I'm telling you, man. You know, he's a William Monroe Trotter is a certified fool.
I'm gonna have to learn about him, but I like him already.
Trotter is something to behold, man. He really, Harvard trained, Ivy League trained, and does stuff like that. Come on, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that brother up. He cussed out the president to his face. Yeah, boy, I gotta find out about him.
The president refused to meet with anybody that was black, lest they denounce William Monroe Trotter. Cuss the president out, man. I mean, really think about that.
Wow.
You wouldn't do that now. You know what I'm saying? And he doing this around the turn of the century. Come on, man. Just wild. William Monroe Trotter.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that one up. And what was the name of that book you talked about with the?
It's something about Black slave rebellions. I have to see if I can find it. I know I had one. I had a copy of it in my office, but my students take glee and delight in, as they put it, liberating books from me. So yeah.
All right. Well, I want to go ahead and take this time to welcome Earth Angel 1105 remix to the class. You are late because school has just got out. You are late, Queen. You are late. Class is out for today. We already at 2 hours and 14 minutes. But we will have class tomorrow at 6:30. Hopefully we'll talk more about William Monroe Trotter.
Oh God,
that good fella.
Oh my God. You know what might be interesting? If we could have the audience put in the chat what they would like us to cover.
Okay. What would y'all like for us to talk about tomorrow? Put it in the chat so we can see what tomorrow program will be
Before
about.
y'all put it up there, I'm rolling with Kendrick Lamar. I hate Drake.
Very, very interesting. I guess that's why we never learned about William Trotter in high school or anything like that, huh? Too much of a radical.
No, you're not going. You would never hear nobody mention William Monroe Trotter. Yeah, there's it's not going to happen. You know, and there's a part of me that I think that exposing people to Trotter is dangerous, because it serves as a blueprint of what not to do. You get what I'm saying? It serves as a blueprint of what not to do. And what I mean, come on, man. Come on. And would throw a whole bucket of flour on him. If they couldn't get close enough to slap his ass, they would just douse him with flour. Come on, man. Come on, man. Ain't we better than this as black people?
It's some people that I could see throwing some damn flour on though.
See that you know what, you might be the reincarnation of William Monroe Trotter. This might be why we did this show, so you can understand who you was in a previous life. You were William Monroe Trotter. Throw flour on a grown man. Do you know how mad you gonna make you throw flour on them? You done messed up their entire vine, their entire outfit cannot be redeemed. You can't put it in water. You can't shake that out. It's a wrap.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna learn about him. But let me ask you this then: if you was interviewing President Biden when Charlemagne was, and he told you, well, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, would you cuss his ass out?
I wouldn't have cussed him out, but I would have certainly took him to task and reminded him that the Democratic Party has not always been the party of black folk. That there's a time when the majority of black folk voted Republican, overwhelming majority. Black folk didn't start voting Democrat until 1934, that off year of FDR's first term. And all black folk really didn't come until that 1960 election between Nixon and JFK. Daddy King, he voted Republican all the way up to that 1960 election, and he was not unusual. So I would have taken him to task for that, but I wouldn't cuss the man out. I can't,
You wouldn't have used not one little cuss word in there?
Oh yeah, I would have probably used some cuss words, but I wouldn't have cussed his ass out like what I know William Monroe Trotter did. Okay, to the point where the president gonna issue a edict that if you black, you know how bad that had to have been. That the president left out of there and was like, you know what? Write this down. If you black and you want to come up in here, you got to denounce William Monroe Trotter. You almost put us back in slavery with that foolishness. Come on, man. No.
Ooh, boy, oh boy.
Yeah, you're gonna look up. Yeah. You gonna look up William Monroe Trotter and be like, there's a resemblance. I'm around here talking about your name is Maurice WMT Muhammad. Be like, yo, well, okay, well, where that come from? Well, let me tell you. In another life, my name was William Monroe Trotter. I found myself. Yeah.
All right. So we got Mayat says the 2024 election. Mr. Dovey said we should discuss how Black people can create their own political party. And Earth Angel says, great one, how to create our own political party. So it looks like it's going to be politics tomorrow.
All right, let's do it, brother.
It is. Politics, politics, politics. How to create your own Black political party. And yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Do it.
All right. Closing comments, Doc?
Oh, man, I'm on. I ain't put my final grades in yet, but I'm close. But I'm on break. I can think of no better way to spend my break than with y'all. And I mean that I'm chilling.
Definitely, definitely. So y'all don't forget tomorrow, 6:30 Central Time. No, 5:30 Central Time, 6:30 Eastern Time.
Yeah. Stop that bias. Stop that bias. Thinking everybody on Eastern Time.
We will be live, and our topic will be politics. And I'm gonna go ahead and read something up on William Monroe Trotter and see exactly why I like that brother. He sounds like a really good brother.
Yeah.
I bet you he'd have cussed Biden ass out.
He would have cussed out every president that would meet with him. That's the Obama included. He would have really cussed Obama out.
I can imagine. Lord have mercy. That is something. So Mr. Dovey says it's my topic. So I'm going to be on time. That is Eastern time. The Eastern time be throwing me off. So the whole world should be on Eastern time and everything be all right. Everything be all right. Just one time. You ain't got to worry about going back an hour, going up an hour. Just stick with everything with Eastern time and the world be set. Perfect. See?
No. Not at all.
All right, family. So as we always say, you kill the nigga in you, I'm going to kill the nigga in me, and our God will reign supreme. We are Black first. Today, tomorrow, and forever. Love you, family. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Where's my...
So you better get the message and get it straight.
You're going to need some bridge work. It's simple as that.
Because we're living in judgment. We're living in implementation.